As the school year approaches and we prepare for the return of our staff and the return of our kids, school leaders, there's a group that we've really got to make sure we pay attention to as we start a new school year. We're going to talk about the difference between parental involvement and true family engagement. Today, we have curated a panel of parents from around the United States to help school leaders prepare for a new school year and think through the idea, how do we effectively engage the families we serve in our school communities?
I'm Courtney.
And I'm Mario.
And this is the EdLeadership Pair podcast brought to you by Marzano Resources and Solution Tree.
Hello and welcome to the EdLeadership Pair podcast. We are blessed today to have four fantastic parents from across the country who are going to spend a little bit of time with us and really speak to educators and educational leaders on what it is that they see going well in schools, the perspective of parents and what they need as far as school partnerships, and really give advice to school leaders. So, Court, we're excited to have these wonderful parents with us here today.
We are. We have a good group of parents from across the nation. We like to do that, make sure we're not just picking all the people that we know and love, although one of them is here today for sure, because we do have to grab some of them.
Absolutely.
But we are very excited for the group that we have, that they are representing parents across all grade levels in multiple states, and just bring to us a really great perspective that I think it's great for all educational leaders to hear. Right?
Yeah, let's jump in.
All right. We'll start out and we'll do a little round of introductions. We'll start with Mike, but we'll have you do your name, where you're from, and just quick age of your kids or grade level.
Yes, my name is Mike DeJohn. I'm from the Kansas City metro area. More specifically, Gardner, Kansas is where I'm from. I have she's going to be 9, so I got a third grader, and I have a rising freshman right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike. We appreciate you being here, and we'll move on to Ken.
Hey, everybody. I'm in Fort Worth, Texas. My daughter is going to be starting 8th grade week after next, the last year of middle school. Whew,
you made it. You're so close.
So close. And awesome. I'm that unicorn PTA dad. No, there's plenty of us, but yeah. Cheers to PTA dad.
You got to look hard to find you, though.
That's true. Thank you so much, Ken. We appreciate you. And we'll move on to Chelsea.
Hi, everyone. I'm Chelsea Gibbs. I have children in every level of school right now, from elementary, middle, high school, and even my oldest is going off to college here in just a few weeks. Over the years, I've served as a band, art, and athletics parent volunteer from 6th to 12th grades across 2 very different districts. One is in an extremely small town in a very rural setting, and the other's in one of our state's largest cities.
That is amazing. Thank you, Chelsea. We know a lot about band parents, and we know that we did not volunteer nearly enough because,
That's true.
Oh my gosh, the amount of work that band parents do is incredible. It's amazing. So thank you to all of you for your service, but especially band parents. Whew, it's a lot. Melissa, we will have you introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Melissa, and I am here in Austin, Texas. I'm originally from the Midwest, though. I was born and raised in Iowa and found myself raising my family here in Austin, Texas. And my oldest daughter attends university. We're headed back there to take her back to school in a couple weeks. She'll be graduating at semester, so she's almost done with her time in college and has had a good experience up there. And then my youngest daughter she'll be a senior at high school. And so, yeah, we're sort of hitting that possibly empty nest stage of life. So yeah, super proud of them. But yeah, it's been a journey, and I spend the majority of my time volunteering with PTA primarily, but I do serve in a couple of other boards in different parts of our community here. But I really enjoy being able to help our kids have the best experiences they can in education.
Yes, thank you so much. And we do know that you were probably Mario's number one go-to parent for all things Westwood High School. So
sure.
Thank you.
I know you kept him
good
together,
supporting him. So
you guys did. I was very lucky.
But yes, we miss him, but we've got a great team there now. So, but yeah, that was. We like to say we're COVID family. So
yes. Well, fantastic. Thank you all for being here again. We really appreciate it. And I know we're going to jump into some really good stuff. Do you want to start us off?
Sure. What we thought would be really powerful to start off a new school year was to say, what's in the minds of our families, the people that we partner with? You know, the whole goal of school is to help raise kids and prepare them for life. Some of that is academically, some of it is socially, emotionally. So we thought it would be a wonderful gift for school leaders who are wrapping their minds around the last few weeks of prep before the children come in the door, just to hear from wonderful parents, what you think school leaders need to know and would like to hear on the way into a new school year. So we've prepared a couple of topics, and we're going to let you guys kind of just free flow through this. So I'm going to ask, in the first big question of our first topic, what is it that you believe schools are doing well for children? Not only your own, but I know you have friends and you live in communities, and you are all community leaders in different ways. So feel free to speak on behalf of your own, experience, but also if you want to extrapolate to a broader voice, about the people that you interact with in your communities. What is it that schools are doing well for children today?
I have some perspective on this. One, because my wife is a social worker in a neighboring district. Her entire family is in education. I used to be an educator, and now I have kids in two different schools in the same district, and I'm seeing very different approaches from both of these schools. But one thing I have come to really realize, at least with my kids and as far as my experience goes, is that the best schools understand that children learn from people that they can trust. The curriculum matters, of course, but the relationships that these educators build with my children is often the doorway through which that curriculum enters. And I mean, you look at the teacher that will engage with the quiet kid that's sitting in the corner, or learning how to help the kid that is a little amplified and teaching them how to regulate and participate in a more constructive manner. The kids remember those teachers. They don't just remember the teacher that's shoving the curriculum down their throat.
Absolutely.
So I see that as something that some of these schools are doing very well, and I think that's something that's emerging as we're moving on right now.
Excellent.
That's great. I love that, Mike. One of the things I see coming back, and of course this isn't universal, but I'm seeing it more and more, is the valuing of parent engagement and bringing parents back on campus. We lost that during COVID. PTA looked very different for a couple of years there, and it took some time, at least in my school district, for parents to get welcomed back on campus. Not because they weren't welcome, but just the logistics of coming out of COVID and all of that. And I think that one of the things that school systems started to recognize was what parent engagement brought to the table and the value that having parents there and engaged brought to the school and the learning environment. And not just the parents that always show up, but really those school systems that make an effort to invite everybody to the table, to do things for parent engagement that make everybody feel welcome, even those parents that might not speak English as a first language. All of those things just make our campuses a more vibrant and engaging place for our kids to be. One of the things I really enjoyed before COVID was Career Day, and then it went away, and now it's back in full force. To see elementary school students, I mean, especially, I think it was like the third and fourth graders were my favorite. To see these parents come in and talk about what they do is just, my opportunity as someone who's not an educator to see what that looks like. And that's something that parents can bring to the table. My daughter was in a school where definitely a Title I school, a lot of economically disadvantaged families, and the exposure to the variety of possible future paths for the kids was really highlighted by bringing parents in to talk about what they do. So yeah, parent engagement and getting parents back on campus for me.
I love a career day. I love an elementary school career day, and kids, and especially, I mean, there's careers that are always really cool for elementary kids to see. You got a vet, bringing in a dog. That's amazing. But then there's the careers that are like, I didn't even know that existed. And then as you get older, you can get these more and more intricate descriptions of the careers that nobody knew existed. And so I just love a career day. I think that's cool. That's a great way of bringing in more parents for sure. Thank you. Go for it,
Yeah,
Chelsea.
I think something that they do really well is they build stable systems that kids can count on. Those predictable routines, clear expectations, and adults who, most importantly, communicate consistently. I see many schools working hard to create a sense of belonging and to respond more thoughtfully to student needs, not just necessarily academically, but also socially and emotionally.
Awesome.
Yeah. That's Chelsea, that we have been in dialogue with a lot of principals. And what I do for a living now is I work and support school leaders nationally all over the country. And that is something that school leaders, I think, have come to understand, that as important, Mike referenced it, as important as a good curriculum so that students are prepared for post K-12 educational experiences, is becoming equally important that the kids are supported in their, in their personal development. How do you interact with peers? How do you interact with other adults? So sort of that part of school that I don't know that we always had a focus on, because we used to, I think, say, well, kids get raised at home, and then in school we give them the 3 R's, so to speak. And I think you've hit on something I think is really a powerful piece of schools in the new age, if you want to call it that, is schools are becoming more of a partnership or need that partnership, as Ken said, so that we can be a shoulder-to-shoulder partner when it comes to raising the kids beyond just the reading, writing, and arithmetic, as it were, once upon a time. So, Melissa, how about you?
Yeah, well, I agree with that totally, and those are some thoughts that I had put aside to share, very similar to what everyone's been saying, which is interesting that we are all in different areas. Some of us in Texas, some of us in other states, that we're seeing the same things. And I think that there should be celebration in that. There's a lot of joy in, bringing that relationships to the table, working on community and parent engagement is so important. And I think that when we can help support our schools in that way, and we know what's needed, we can help bridge those gaps that might exist. And I've also seen a lot of community support and partnerships as well, filling in those need gaps. And I think that is also key too, so that everyone feels included. In my volunteer career, I'm not only just working with schools who are in a suburban area or in the capital city area, but I'm also working with communities that are outside of those areas and a little bit smaller communities, but they're growing really fast. And so what I'm seeing in those areas is that the community partners are coming from businesses, and they're joining, and they're trying to find a way to help support the schools, because it's really important, and so I think that's interesting, that we're seeing similar things and we're feeling similar things, and I think that there should be some celebration in that, for sure.
Absolutely. And I love that you guys have talked about building relationships with students, teachers building relationships with students, with schools building relationships with parents and increasing their parental engagement, and then basically building relationships with the community. I mean, this is what this group has focused on. Yeah. And so what a great statement to public education, and all the time, and maybe it's working in the world of ed tech that I live in, but there's a lot of time when it's like, is education ever going to go out the window because of AI and because of everything technology taking over? And it's like, you can't replace the relationships. And you guys have just all talked about the reason why education has to exist for our students and our families and our community, because all those things are connected in that way that you can't replace that with technology. So yeah. I love that. Well, thank you guys. Go ahead, Melissa.
And frankly, I wouldn't be sitting here if I didn't have the relationship I had with Dr. Acosta when we were serving together in school, and so like that just kind of, that's an example right now in the moment,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, what are some things, let's turn and say, what are some things that parents right now might be struggling with as it relates to their kids' educational experiences? So what are some things on the flip side that you're like, this is a little bit of a struggle. And maybe it's something from the past that you've seen, or as you guys have had kids, y'all have had multiple levels now. I know, Mike, you're in third grade. Is that what you said?
I've got one in third grade and one going into high school right now.
And one going into high school. So yeah, we've got you're across the board now. So
You guys
we're good.
have it all covered. Absolutely.
Covered. So share with us some things that you think are like, this is a struggle. And if parents had a little more help or support or direction from the schools, then this could be beneficial to them and their kids.
This actually happened today.
It's fresh.
Yes. Parents are overwhelmed, quite frankly. And I mean, schools sometimes assume that families understand how everything works. They assume we understand the acronyms, the procedures, the chains of communication, the activity fees, the deadlines, and even the unwritten expectations, and many don't. And even though I have been in the system, my wife has been in the system, these are things that we do understand and that we do know. And my wife works for another district, but here was today's frustration. In Kansas, they have implemented across the board a no cell phone policy. Mm-hmm. And it was broad. And as the policy person in the family, I'm like, well, that's intentionally broad so that they can kind of wiggle around in it. And I said, and I understand that's frustrating, but what are they saying? And her question was, can my kid have her phone on her person if she's not using it? Or how does this work? Is there a check-in for the phone? Because there's no check-in points talked about. And they just told us to just go reference the board policy and you'll find out the information you need. And she said, so I clicked the link and the link was broken. And then I went to their website and it doesn't say where the board information is. I said, so because I understand the system here, I was able to go to the board's website and find the board documents and then find the corresponding state document. And she said, I had to dig through 5 or 6 layers just to find the information that I needed. She goes, I'm concerned because none of my parents, because she's a social worker, she's like, none of my parents are going to know how to get this information. What are we doing? And so I think that's a big pressure point for the families out there is they don't know how to navigate this stuff. And there's nobody there standing in the gap showing them where to go.
Yep. That's a great example. And we live that with one of our children going through the child find process. And we kept saying to ourselves, if we have a child that needs help and support, and we were not public school educators, it would have been so difficult to navigate that whole world and try to find what are all the little pieces that have to be in place and what are all the timelines and what are all the documents we expect to get back and we should be tracking. And if we were not public educators ourselves, it would have been almost impossible to navigate all of that with the information that we were given. So same kind of thing, I think, in that example. Thank you for sharing that, Mike.
I hate to ring the technology bell too, but that's what was also on my mind. And it's so broad. We in Texas also have a campus cell phone ban during instructional hours. You can't have cell phone. And actually that took some of the pressure off of our ISDs because they no longer had to make the decision. It was made for them. Yeah. So
that's right.
no matter where you come down on it. But I think it's broader than that. There's so many questions about technology right now. I mean, I know that we as a society were keen on making sure our kids were technologically savvy as technology became a bigger and bigger part of our lives. And then the question comes, did we go too far? The state assessment in Texas starts in 3rd grade, and it is now taken on a laptop. Kids don't know how to type in 3rd grade, at least not in our school district. They don't offer keyboarding in elementary school. But even if that wasn't the way the state assessment worked, our kindergarten on through elementary school, they're given an iPad 1-to-1. And then in middle school, it switches to a laptop. I think it's great that kids have access that don't have access at home, but I think parents are confused as to what are best practices? How much time should a kid be looking at a screen? If the pedagogy is that it is good for kids to use technology X number of hours a day, how does that impact how much screen time they get at home? And I think our schools could could be helpful in supporting parents in navigating that whole spectrum of technology. And, now we have hundreds of school districts across the country that are suing the social media companies for serving an addictive product. I mean, there's a lot of parallels to vaping, really. It's,
Right.
Marketing to kids something that we know is addictive to kids and refusing to require age verification to get on. So, I've heard, lots of takes on that. I heard one of the researchers from the book, The Anxious Generation, speak, saying that they polled some kids and they didn't want to give up technology. How much would you have to pay them to give up technology for a month? And it was a lot. But then they asked them, how much would we have to pay you to give up technology if all your friends had to give up technology too? And the survey response was that the kids would pay them to remove that pressure of if all their friends got off too, they'd be happier. So it's just some interesting things there and our school systems can't answer all those questions for us, but I think that if we had a more comprehensive view of how technology was impacting those young brains, it would help us as parents.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. And we
That's a
talk
big
about that
one.
all the time
Yeah.
because the difference between social technology and educational technology and even effective educational technology and ineffective, that's basically just like a worksheet, but on an iPad. That's not any reason to go to technology if it's basically a worksheet. So
Yeah.
I know you've done a lot of research on that.
That's something I'm hot on right now, Ken, because you said something that I hadn't really. This is why hearing from parents is so powerful, because we're trying to help teachers understand the pedagogical balance, because what the technology can do well is it can differentiate for children different than teachers alone can. Right. So the four of you on the screen, let's say I have all four of your children in my class. Each of your child might be in a different place in their understanding of my curriculum. So the computer can differentiate and give you more practice and more support at each level of where your child is. That's a beautiful thing, right? Now, the other side of the coin is if children spend too much time on this adaptive technology, there is a lot of evidence, very, very, very prudent evidence that it's actually causing the children to struggle with things like attention span, working memory and processing. So there's some real tangible negatives of overuse of the technology. So Ken, what you said that gave me a big light bulb was, it seems to me, you mentioned earlier that parent engagement is something that maybe could pick up a little bit more. It seems to me that our schools and our parents getting on the same page about how much time are we going to give your child technology exposure when they're with us for 8 hours? And then what do we recommend for you at home? Of course, at home is your own, parents control that world, but we could at least give you a zone to say, because they're spending, let's say, 3 to 4 hours between all their classes, then we recommend 1 to 2 hours at home or something like that, right? That's a great idea, Ken. I had never really thought about it from a parent's perspective. Like if the school would give me a heads up, hey, stay in this window because your kid's on a computer this much at school. That's a great point, sir. I had not made that point. I think that's a really powerful thought.
I definitely had similar thoughts, kind of in my notes here, but we got to do this year some proactive education for parents, and actually Courtney was able to be a panelist on what our AI conversation we were having at the district level for a PTA event, and that was super helpful. And I mean, our panelists were great and gave some great insight, and really grateful to have her. But Courtney, I think you can back me up. Like I think the most important part of that evening was a conversation that the parents had in small groups.
Yep, I would agree.
They got to really relate, we had them divide up between grade, like elementary, middle school, and high school groups. And, we found that everyone was kind of struggling with kind of the same things and had very similar questions and kind of had similar experiences, but they never really talked about it. And so I think it's so important for, our educators and our school districts to consider, having open forums like this to discuss these things so we can hear what's being planned at the district level, what individual schools are doing, behind the doors where we're not always there, knows what's going on. And not all of our kids come home and tell us everything that's going on. Dr. Acosta knows my oldest daughter. She always told me everything that was going on at Westwood. I knew all the time. I knew all the things because she was always paying attention. Now the other one, I'm like, what is going on? You need to tell me. And she's like, oh, I don't know, Mom, and if I ask again, she might try to find some details for me, but she's just, so, if you don't, even a parent like me who attempts to be engaged in an inappropriate way and trying to be aware of what's going on, sometimes you don't know, and you don't know how to prepare your kids at home. And I think there are a lot of questions that are being asked, and it kind of goes back to what Mike was saying earlier too. Parents are kind of not sure what to do next sometimes, and I think that that's really important. The other piece to that, especially in the AI world, that we talk a lot about, especially here locally at Westwood, is academic integrity. It's part of the curriculum there. It's part of their mission statement. What does that look like? And I think it's really hard to expect 15, 16-year-olds, when they're freshmen and entering into that high achieving situation of high school and trying to prepare them to be adults, to expect them to be at that level of understanding if they haven't had those kinds of experiences when they were younger and had some expectation put on them. Now, my family, we had an interesting experience. We were in a great vertical learning community, but my kids went to a Title I school that also had the IB program. And so my kids were exposed to not only a lot of different cultures in that school, which was great, and that they might not have been if they'd gone to a different elementary school, but they were also exposed and had expectations put on them for character behavior. And that continued on to Grisham, which also had IB curriculum. And when they were there, those things, there was expected behaviors. And so coming to Westwood, even though it was much bigger than the smallest middle school in the district, they were a little bit more prepared for that and had a better understanding of that. But not everybody is in those experiences. So, I think looking at the levels of what expectations are being set, what information is being out there given to parents, and what everybody is working on collectively as a whole is really important, especially if you can keep that going, at all the different levels of education.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how about you, Chelsea? You want to add in on this piece? Like, what do parents, whether you or people in your community or your friends, what are things that you guys find as pain points for the children as they are experiencing school? And we know you shared with us, you've got children kind of at all the levels of school. So we are very excited to hear kind of your perspective as you've got kids spread throughout the school system.
Sure. I think a big part of it is trust building through clear and honest communication, in which technology can play a key role in being a vital tool in doing that. Families, we can accept hard decisions and be viewed as a partner. We're not, problems or, or even I know personally, I can even respect a "I don't know, let me get back to you" kind of answer. But what our family personally struggles with, and I know a lot of families in my area, is just unclear messaging, shifting explanations, or learning changes late after they've happened. Consistency, transparency, and a clear who to contact pathway, really matters. And just giving that comfort piece to parents, even students, leaders, directors, the district, even just having that clear pathway on who does what, when, and where do the families come in, how can we help and how do we bridge that gap all together? And I think just that clear, honest communication piece is vital for any district, big or small, with technology or in small group form, just however it's done, just needs to be clear and concise.
Yeah, that's such a great call out to, and it's something that we have talked about, I don't know how many times on this podcast, because obviously we have educational leaders listening to our podcast. And so how many times have we talked about providing clear and concise and...
Well, and I'm curious if can we ask around and anybody, pitch in here, but Courtney and I just graduated our last two children and they're all off to school now. So Melissa, you referenced being empty nest. We are literally less than 10 days. We're less than 10 days away from
Not
it.
that we're counting down.
We have a little,
my
you can't see it on the other side of this camera, but right here in our office, we might have a little, we might have a little prison style, checklist going here as our children are getting close to going. But anyway, here's the question, because as our kids, we had 4 that went through high school, all kind of in proximity of each other. And Courtney and I always struggled a little bit with the campus communication piece, and we always try to stay as kind and respectful as possible on this podcast, but we don't believe that our local campus leader listens, so we're a little more free with our statements. But we didn't have a great experience with communication. There were times it was way too much. Too many emails, and then you'd get 4 texts to tag to the email, and then sometimes you'd be like, I didn't hear anything about that, but they're like, well, it might have been buried in one of those 17 emails. So we'd love to know, you just hit on something, Chelsea, and it ties to something that Ken said and Mike already said, and how can families best partner if communication is key? What do y'all think is the best way to be communicated with? Melissa, you even said maybe it's put people in the cafeteria and just let the parents talk to each other. So I don't know if you guys can throw out some ideas. What are ways you would like to be communicated? And then I think not just the communication, but how can parents better engage? Like, what would a school need to do to, you send me a one-way text. I can't, that doesn't really engage me. So I don't know if anybody's got ideas on that. How do we get better communication and better two-way engagement with families?
This is something I wrestle with my parents. I advocate for all the time, because I'm a firm believer that most of the conflict that we have amongst our boards, amongst our parent groups, most of that conflict begins in the space where information ends. So you got to get the information out to them. And so when I have a board come to me and say, how do we communicate with our parents better? And they'll often ask for a 1-point solution. Like, what app can I use, or what method can I use to communicate with my parents better? And I'm like, well, unfortunately, there isn't one, because you're asking for 100% adoption, and that's not going to happen. You need to meet your parents where they're at. Do they need an app? Do they need an email? Do they need a text message? Do they need some kind of proprietary system within the school systems that are built up? Do they need a carrier pigeon? And after I lay all of those out, I'm like, unfortunately, if you want to reach all of these parents, you need to use all of these methods. And yes, that's cumbersome. But if the communication is that important to you, if the reduction of conflict from your parents is that important to you, you're going to do these things. So unfortunately, I don't think there really is a simple solution here, other than we're just going to have to bear down and get the information out there the best we can.
I think that's a great point. And when I talk to principals and try to do, training for PTA, and I always tell them, like, you can't communicate enough. Like, over communicate, because then even when you're over communicating, you're still missing people and they're finding about things later or whatever. And having those relationships with your parents and caregivers, I think that's important, and also, we talked about this too already, knowing where to look for information too, I think is important. And who are the people behind the pieces of information. And so I think when we know, who our admins are, when we know who our APs are, when we know who our counselors are, that also helps too, because it also empowers caregivers with the knowledge of knowing who's in charge of making some of these decisions. And they might just have to ask themselves, if they can't find something or aren't hearing something. But yeah, and definitely use all of those opportunities of communication that you have, whether it's social media, newsletters, emails, robocalls. I know it's old school, but sometimes people listen to those voicemails, text messages, all the things.
And carrier pigeons. Mike, that's a good one.
Carrier
Mike,
pigeons, owls, whatever it takes. I mean, if you've got parent groups on your campus, your PTAs, your booster clubs, if it's appropriate, ask them to help share information. I can't tell you how many times I've thought, well, if we had known that was happening, we could have helped out.
Yeah.
Chelsea, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to piggyback off of that. Still tying it into communication, I feel like a big piece of it also falls in line with fiduciary stewardship and prioritization. budgets, bylaws, MOUs, and even just standard operating procedures. They're more than just, some documents we've had created. They're actual moral documents. Families want leaders who can explain priorities plainly, show how the funds are used, show who's in charge of what or what comes next or what to expect. And they want to see that those internal controls are demonstrated. So that way we know that decisions are truly made in the best interest of our students and eliminate any kind of conflict because we can refer back to those moral documents. This is our culture. This is how we operate.
Oh, that's a good one.
That makes really good sense. All right, Ken, what about you, sir? Anything to add on this sort of communication piece?
Yeah, on both those. I mean, that we were talking about the campus and at the systems level. The campus level, like you said, I mean, you can bury people in information and then not know what email that was in and where to find it. I will say some of the most useful things I've found in campus communication is when, sure, the emails go out and the newsletter goes out, but they always link to some static things that we can refer to. Like our principal has a calendar online so that we can go and check that calendar anytime. I know there's still going to be parents that go, where's the link? I lost the link, but to have information we can go to, I think is useful as opposed to just depending on it coming to us, because there's so many sources now. I mean, some parents get their info from social media. Some get it from the group me that the PTA parents are on. So that's my observation there. But I really like what you said, Chelsea, because I think that at the systems level, one of the things that could be most useful to parents is just more transparency. There's a lot going on in public education at state and national level right now that we need to honor our parents and let them understand exactly what's at stake. We've got some concerning literacy outcomes nationwide for students. We've got funding gaps where, our states and districts aren't getting everything they need to provide the services that we expect. But we need transparency from our administration and from our trustees about exactly where our campuses are. Our trustees need to set goals that the administration needs to meet, and those need to be clear and talked about. And then when the administration reports out on progress towards those goals, it needs to be clear. It doesn't need to be obfuscated, which is so easy to do with data. And it prevents some really disappointing surprises that can come up. In Texas, where we are, there's a state law that if a school district has a campus that is F rated for 5 consecutive years, we have an A through F rating system for our districts and our campuses, that the state can come in and take over. That is what we're currently dealing with as an intervention in my daughter's school district. I would wager that 99% of parents in our district didn't even know that was on the horizon for our district. And I bet that if it was on their radar, they would have been advocating with those trustees on a daily basis to, hey, fix this campus that failed for 4 consecutive years. We don't want that 5th. And that just goes back to that one word, just transparency. Just let the parents know what the reality of the situation is. And then we can come together as a community and find solutions.
Yeah, that is a fabulous point. And I'm thinking, Ken, because we're in Austin, and so we've been watching everything that's happened in Houston ISD with their takeover and all of that stuff, and it's rough. It's not any kind of ideal situation that we would have wanted our kids to go through in public education. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. When you are getting into that situation as a school leader or a district leader, it is definitely time to bring in your parents and start involving them in the advocacy. And I love the fact that were you saying, Ken, that you also work with school board members? Like you're in the training aspect of board members?
I do, yeah. The past 4 or 5 years, I've worked with trustees and aspiring trustees, yeah.
Yeah, and that is so critical to have a well-trained board, because how many times have we seen just disastrous school boards that had some kind of axe to grind, or different members of the board have different axes to grind, and then it just becomes completely dysfunctional instead of really working together for the whole of the community and all the students and all the staff and, supporting the whole district.
Yeah, bless you, Ken, on that because
for sure.
As school leaders, and Courtney and I have we have friends that are superintendents. We both were trained as superintendents. Courtney sat as a executive director. What was your title? Chief of operations in Georgetown ISD. So a fairly large district. So we just have seen that while there is responsibility for school leaders and of course educators in the classroom, like everybody has their part, the school boards have such an important part because they can throw a real monkey wrench into a good system if the school board itself is not cohesive. Yeah. So I think that's a really powerful. And Ken, I had never thought of it, but twice in my career, I was an administrator on a campus that was in years 3 and 4 here in Texas of that 5-year clock. And I never had put 2 and 2 together in that way, but my community had no clue. Neither of those 2 communities had no clue what we were facing. In both cases, we got ourselves out of trouble, and both of those schools never went back after our time there, which is, a blessing. But as you said that, it gave me a perspective that I don't know that I'd really thought through. Our parents didn't understand the stakes that we were dealing with inside the building, mm-hmm. and that would have been helpful if all of us were rallying and rowing in the same direction with the same sense of urgency, given the stakes that we were facing at that time. So I just had never put that perspective, which is why talking to parents is so important.
I know.
Yeah, so important. Well, listen, we want to honor your time, and we promise not to keep you all because you are raising children and have jobs and all the other things you're doing. So if you're willing to get into this last piece, which if you could give advice to school leaders, and, we do have leaders on this podcast listening, not only across the 50 states, but Canada. We've got folks in Asia, South
international
America.
groups.
Yeah, so there's people listening that we're not saying we're the biggest ed podcast in the world, but there are folks listening. So as you have given all of this good insight already, if you could give some advice, some parting words to principals and school leaders, maybe even superintendents that are about to launch another school year, what would you, and I hate to say, hey, speak on behalf of all parents, so I'm not saying that, but I'm saying from your perspective as a parent with all your expertise, what do you want all school leaders to know? What advice, what support do you want to give them as they enter into this school year?
I think they need to ask for what they need. I think they need to be okay with letting their parent groups that are there to support them, letting their community partners know when it's appropriate, to ask what they need, because we can't help if we don't know. And if there's a way to share things, that's an okay way to share things, then I think that really helps. Like you were just, realizing, Dr. Costa, that, you're in a situation, oh gosh, maybe if some people knew, we could have, partnered better together. And I think that happens. I think that happens a lot, unfortunately. And, sometimes it's a small ask, like, do we need some microwaves? I mean, every time we needed a microwave, all we had to do was put something out on Facebook, and then you had 14 microwaves showing up at Westwood. I mean, I know that some communities don't have as much support as that, but even if it's a small ask, I think that it's important to share that information when they can. And I had some other, like I said, I think we're doing a great job covering a lot of topics and sharing a lot of really important things about, being transparent and, and just putting kids first is really, key, and as well as building those relationships. But I think the other thing on the backside of the ask is to know that there are parents out there who care, and for whatever reason, they're not always able to be in the schools. They're not always able to be in all the assemblies. They're not always able to be at those board meetings. They're not able to get to the PTA meeting. And so I think if, district and local school leaders can remember that there are those parents who do care, who do want to know what's out there, but they just can't always be there in person. Finding ways to get to them or get the message to them is really important too. And just to know that, maybe they can't be the one who's always showing up with, with the cookies and the gift cards, but, that there are those who out there care, but making sure that information gets to them and you don't miss those groups of families, and try to figure out a way to help them be involved. There's divided households, there's parents who are working 2-3 jobs to make ends meet, and there's a lot of life happening out there, that parents are dealing with, and so I think putting the ask out there and just being aware of all the opportunities to try to reach the different types of parents and caregivers that you have is really important. That's the main reason why I'm doing the things that I'm doing, and I'm super lucky my husband helps support that, because not all parents have that gift and that opportunity to be able to spend as much time working in their communities, fighting for kids as I do, or Ken, or the other Chelsea or Mike might have, in the connections that we have to do so, which you all referred back to yourselves and helping your own kids, and because you had experiences being administrators and were able to help, and so that's why I'm here. It's for the parents who aren't able to have a voice, and I think knowing that there are parents and caregivers out there who are in those situations, and being mindful of that.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you, Melissa.
Yeah, I want to just kind of say on that, to all of our administrators and educators listening right now, as a parent, as a guy with a kid in school and a family that families want meaningful participation. We really do. We want to help. And this is something I combat a lot with the parents that I deal with. And there's this growing misunderstanding, or this growing belief, if you will, between generations, between the Gen X generation and the millennial generation. There somehow was this idea that was developed by the older group that the younger group just doesn't care. And I don't believe that's the case. I really believe that these parents do care, but they need to be asked the right way to step in and help. And the thing is, they don't respond to the blanket ask. They respond to specificity. Schools say that they want parent involvement, but what it feels like to a lot of these parents is that they're requesting parent labor. Come participate in the fundraiser, sell the thing, push this equipment, come bring us something that we need. I mean, those things all matter, but involvement must also include voice, education, relationship with the educators, and an opportunity for these parents to actually help shape the community. Because I'm a believer that people support what they help create, but they have to be invited into more than just the work.
Mike, that is so well said, sir. That's and such a nice piggyback from Melissa's point, because parents will come and give as much as they can. But what I just heard you say is just so foundational, which is it's got to be more than just give. We have to be brought in as co-designers. We need to be brought in to help solve problems. We need to be brought in to be partners and a voice in how we move forward in educating and raising children. So, man, yes, so great, Mike. And of course, Melissa, your answer is spot on. But Mike, that's like a perfect dovetail, is that both, if I'm a school leader, I need our leaders to hear that. Both of those pieces carry equal weight in designing good family partnerships. So, Ken, not to put any pressure on you, but now we need a really great answer from you, sir.
Hey, I was literally just going to sum it up as see parents as partners. I mean, that's the simplification of that advice. I think that goes a long way. But I would add to that, though, that both our school leaders and as parents, we need to recognize that not all parents can show up in the same way. Not all parents have the privilege that I do that allows me to volunteer and run carnival, which will just about kill me every year, but I do it anyway. But not every parent can show up in the same way. And I think what you said, Mike, is really important. I think that sometimes we may be thinking that the old ways that we reached parents are the same way we reach parents now, and that's just not true. I think that we had some really meaningful things at my daughter's elementary school to make sure everybody felt welcome at the table at the capacity that they had. We had a church down the street donate church down the street donate food for a taco bar. And
sorry, there we go.
Okay.
Sorry, Chelsea's got some tech. Please continue.
Okay, and and we had our two-way dual language teachers come and sit one at every table to facilitate that bilingual conversation for everybody. And that went a long way to see just how much parent engagement increased over the following years, because, we welcomed people in a way that worked. And I think that's going to be different for every campus, for every subpopulation. But looking at parents as partners and knowing that every parent has to show up in a different way. I think if we are mindful of those things, if our school leaders are mindful of those things, we'll go a long way in supporting our public schools.
Thank you, Ken. Miss Chelsea, if you'll bring us home.
Sure thing. I think the main thing that families want leaders to understand is that trust is built in those small moments. Simply returning a phone call or responding to that email, or maybe it's just correcting misinformation and owning it quickly. Documenting changes, using consistent processes. We want communication, to be spoken and complete. What's changing? Why is it changing? What are the steps that are involved? Who's doing what and where? Just clarity. We want leaders who model professionalism. This one I feel really passionate about. That's going to be our leaders that are handling criticism. They're answering the hard questions without defensiveness. Those who treat parents, families, and members of the organization and members of the community with respect and treat them truly as partners rather than just maybe another problem on their plate for the day. Also leaders who address conflict with structure and who keep the focus on what's truly best for the children, not on pride, not on politics, and not on personalities. We also want strong stewardship of our time and money, especially when fundraising or fees are involved. Clear approvals, transparent reporting, and guardrails protect everyone. That means the kids, the staff, the directors, the district, everyone's involved is getting protected by these guardrails. Fundraising runs on trust, so it needs basic internal controls. Families want clear rules for who can approve the spending, separation of duties, and simple routine reporting back to the group. When adults show integrity in how they communicate, how we're governing, how we're doing business, even just how we're communicating with one another, students are truly learning what a true responsible leader really looks like and how to appropriately handle conflict at this stage in their lives and even going into adulthood.
Wow, thank you guys so much. Well, again, we could sit here. Courtney and I are like this, what our listeners have come to know is that this is a little bit of a date for us. We hang out and we talk shop. And so judge us if you need to. So we would sit here all night long, but we want to honor that we, asked for this little time window of your time. And we can't thank you enough, because I just think you guys have given in 1 hour such insight and such guidance that school leaders, it's really hard for them to understand the other side of the coin. School leaders, we know they work really hard. They spend hours upon hours, but you end up in a little bit of a bubble sometimes. So to hear from parents and your perspective, and to come at it from such a wonderful partnership perspective as the four of you have, is just really not only heartwarming, but Courtney and I always say this. One of the things we love about our podcast is there's so many people doing so many good things in name of supporting our children. I am personally grateful that you guys are willing to share your perspectives. And so I don't know if Courtney, you want to close us out.
Yeah, this was a lot of really valuable stuff that if I were a public educator listening to this, I'm making my list of like, oh my gosh, what are the things that I need to make sure that I take care of? But also, what are the ways that I am reaching out to my parents and having some of the same conversations? We had 3 questions for you guys. We asked, what do schools do right for parents and students? And where are parents and students struggling? And then what's just your advice? And we spent an hour with 4 parents getting a lot of really, really good, valuable information. So imagine how powerful it would be if you were a school leader doing that same conversation in your community and getting that input directly from the parents who are in your school system. And so thank you guys so much for all of your time today. We really appreciate it. Super valuable. And with that,
yeah, we just want to say thank you guys. We appreciate you and hope to see you all at some point somewhere.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Thank you guys. Best of luck starting out this school year to you and all your kids and your school leaders.
Thank you. Much appreciated and needed. Take care.
Sure.
Yeah, you too. I'm Courtney.
And I'm Mario.
And this is the Ed Leadership Pair podcast brought to you by Marzano Resources and Solution Tree.